Hey, David, thank you so much for that introduction. And thanks to both you and Chloe for the invitation to come and speak. I'm so pleased that you all have been able to, pivot to a conference virtually. I know you were somewhat disappointed that you didn't get to do something in person. And we're all in the midst of being versatile, I know. And hopefully we'll be able to come back together soon and really connect one-on-one. But I'm so pleased to be here. And Dave, you teed us up a little bit to talk about comprehensive prevention planning, and to also talk a little bit about advocacy, which we've really been diving quite a bit, quite deeply into building some advocacy training and tools out. And I know Mary Segawa wasn't able to come today to present, but we are working on building up some more consultants. Mary's developed an in-person training for us and also a virtual training. And so we're going to launch probably pilot the virtual again and launch the in-person. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But just to make sure everybody has a chance to get in the room and do some introductions, I wanted to share just the slide deck here and kind of a fun little reframe, right? Sometimes we can be so full of all the great falls that we take that we forget that there's sometimes some fun involved. And so it'd be great if you can just let me know. Can you see my screen at this point?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. So it would be great if you could put your name into the chat box, kind of the organization that you represent, and something that you're looking forward to this fall or that you enjoy about this time of year. So if you could help me kind of just get us anchored in the day with some gratitude, looking forward to the good things that are ahead of us by putting your name and the organization you're part of into the chat box. And something you're looking forward to this fall. And I am looking forward to some cooler weather. Thanks, Mallory. Enjoying the beautiful colors. Oh, I know, the yummy treats. Congratulations, 17th wedding anniversary. Congratulations, that's something to look forward to. Absolutely. Anyone else? Oh, camping and hunting. Celebrate another wedding celebration of 44 years. Volleyball, hockey, youth advocacy work. Oh, good. Going back east and visiting family. Trick-or-treaters. Fun. Cool mornings, pretty fall colors. Yes, I woke up this morning and definitely starting to feel the cool weather on this part of the Sierra, and so grateful to have clear air, right? Just the simplest things in life to be grateful for. And we know from research that gratitude and practicing gratitude, which this kind of falls into a little bit, is it's really one of our strategies and practices that we know that builds us up and builds others up and creates a well of resiliency. So I just wanted, feel free to continue putting this in the chat. It's just a lot of fun to hear what you're looking forward to. But I'm going to move on in our presentation. And today, what the focus, when Dave asked me to do this a couple of weeks ago, I thought, well, you know, the comprehensive prevention planning is super important. I know a lot of you all are involved and knowledgeable of, you know, of prevention science. And also I am continuing to learn as I work with people, you know, at the PTTCs, get to work with researchers, but also local level folks. So it's, you know, an ongoing process. So hopefully as we move through this, you feel free to share, and also let me know if we get too far off the mark, and we can kind of refocus and go a little bit more deeply in specific areas of engagement that you might want to talk about related to your coalitions. So these, just a quick disclaimer, anything I share here are my views and based on the science of prevention and not necessarily those of SAMHSA. We do work under a cooperative agreement as the Northwest Prevention Technology Transfer Center, and these are my partners, and Dr. Kevin Haggerty, who recently retired from SDRG. He's going to be spending more time with us on the Northwest Prevention Technology Transfer Center project, but he's kind of semi-retired, and so he is the PI, and then one of the co-directors is Brittany Rose Cooper, and she's out of Life Sciences program at WSU, Washington State University. And Louise Parker, she works with us on our special projects. And then there's me at CASAT at the University of Nevada, Reno. And we form an interesting partnership, and I'm really grateful to have them. And one of the things that we have in common is this passion for moving prevention science forward into the real life of a community, so that to activate communities for change and to create context for prevention practices, programs to thrive, so that we can get to impact. And this is where I'm going to kind of focus our attention today. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to just kind of set out 7 principles of kind of what public health principles that we incorporate into comprehensive prevention planning. And these are going to look familiar to many of you. And we're going to name just a few benefits of the coalition model, and then also talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have with coalitions nowadays. And then we're going to talk about some action steps, and hopefully these action steps are going to be embedded into the training that we offer as part of the Prevention Technology Transfer Center. So here is the agenda. Again, the 7 principles, kind of the role of our work in building up the prevention work source as the Technology Transfer Center. And then we'll get into those strengths and challenges and provide you with some tools. And then I want to leave some time for questions and answers at the end. And just as a way to kind of get us started, there is the parable. What I love about storytelling, I'm reading a book on storytelling right now, and we're getting ready to have a webinar on using your data and using storytelling to share your data. That's going to be at the end of October. So just want to put that one in there for you. It's a free webinar. But with any good stories, there's always those core components, you know, that we want to keep, but there's also the freedom, you know, to change some elements of a story to really fit the storyteller and to fit the needs of the audience. So that's really what I like about the parable of the river, and how we can use the parable of the river to talk about prevention. How many of people are familiar with the parable of the river when we talk about our work in substance misuse prevention? If I can see maybe a raise of hands. All right, I see one hand raising. Thank you, Tara. Any other hands raising? A thumb, great, hands. All right. Well, good, see some more hands. I'm going to give you just a really quick overview just to get us grounded of the river analogy. And and then we'll move forward from there. But basically, I want you to imagine a rushing river, and one of the key elements of the parable is that you, as you're on the bank of the river, you notice someone who is going by and they're screaming for help and yelling out, and they're drowning. You jump in the river, you pull them out. Oh, thank goodness, we saved that young person. And then a little bit later, you look and there goes another young person. You jump in the river, you pull them out. And then another, and you're pulling them out. And then you are starting to get really worn out. So you bring in a few people to help you, and they start pulling people out. And then all of you start wondering, what is happening here? Why are all these people drowning? And what are we going to do? So you decide to go upstream to really look at what is causing the problem of people drowning in the river. And what do you find out? Depends on the river, right? And the context. In this parable today, what you find out is that there's a bridge, and it's very poorly put together in disarray, and people are attempting to go over the bridge, and they're falling into the river. There's also some areas along the side of the river where children play, and it's not there's not signage and there's no barriers up, so they're slipping into the river there. So these are examples of risk factors that are contributing to people falling into the river. And so now that people understand what those risk factors are, they can better plan and look at what do we do to address these problems. So that's just kind of a short kind of glimpse into the parable of the river. And really what we are doing as we think about prevention is we are starting to ask some really key questions. And we do this with our communities. And we're starting to think about what are the substance use problems in our community and or other behavioral health problems. And so we're starting to look at data and specific to our river and the context of our communities on the banks of that river. If we think about how substance use or behavioral problems are interacting with that river, we really want to know very specific information about our community. And then who is experiencing those problems, and really what age are they, and when in their lifespan are they most susceptible to these problems, and why are they having these problems, and where in what context, for example, what community context, what part of this river of our community life are they getting caught up, and bigger picture, why? And those are the risk and protective factors that we begin to look like. What is protecting some people who are not falling into the river? And it might be that some communities have a stronger bridge and on parts of that river, and another community is going across a really weak bridge, and so they're falling in. So we're looking at the context of our communities and families and relationships in those communities, and we're looking for what are the risk and protective factors that are specifically driving these problems. And the key to really answering these questions is a strategic planning process. And whether that's the strategic prevention framework, or if it's CTC, or the communities that care process, which preceded the SPIF and really informed the SPIF many years ago, or if it's a program like Prosper. So these are the public health questions that help us to create a comprehensive approach. And these are 7 principles that in prevention work, and at the Northwest PTTC, that we work to kind of integrate into all of our services to build the prevention workforce and to train them. So it's this repetitive effort where we are hoping to focus on each of these specific areas, go deeper, and build them out in different ways. So our work is really about promotion and prevention. And when we talk about promotion and prevention, we can't not talk about the spectrum of behavioral health services. And I'm sure many of you have seen this. It used to be called the Continuum of Care. And when the new report came out from the Institute of Medicine, they renamed this to the Spectrum of Behavioral Health Services. And basically what this is saying, demonstrating, is that we as society, we've developed this spectrum of services to meet people wherever they might be experiencing behavioral health challenges. So before a problem, during, or after. And one of the areas that is new to the spectrum is the promotion piece. And promotion has always been in there, but with this round of the IOM, they really started to articulate what we mean by promotion and who those populations are that we're really wanting to work with in promotion, as well as those strategies. So I'm going to stop for just a minute before I get into this. And I'd like for you to think about how you would define wellness. And if you can, put in some key elements of your definition into the chat box. How would you define wellness? Thanks, Shannon. Physical, emotional, spiritual balance. Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, so keep putting some healthy in mind, body, and spirit. Whole health in a variety of areas. Similar to the sources of strength elements, yes, a healthy lifestyle. So thanks so much for putting that your thoughts in the chat. This idea of wellness, I think SAMHSA, when they developed their wellness wheel, and we really started kicking off this idea of wellness with a few years back with the with the SAPS training, is that there are like 8 sectors of wellness, and even financial wellness. So this idea of really helping communities, our society on a whole, and our communities and our families start thinking about how can we promote health and well-being. So that's the work of promotion, is really helping people to thrive and to move through whatever developmental stage they're in with success and to be able to thrive. So if there are societal, restrictions like institutional racism or predatory lending practices when it comes to keeping some people out of economic success. Those are some examples of when we're looking at the society level of what we might see as factors that are reducing people's ability to be to promote health and wellness across the society. At the community level, we're looking at ways to support overall promotion of everyone in our community, overall wellness and health of our entire community. So this might be developing ways to bring our larger community together, developing policies that are supportive overall of the workplace and families, that are supportive of the institutions to promote health and wellness. And then at the individual and family level, these might be leave policies, social emotional learning for children in the school. So we're really focusing them on health promotion and helping them get through those challenges of the developmental stages with success. And when we move towards prevention, we are really looking at focusing people on, we're looking more at a behavioral health problem that we're trying to prevent. And prevention is all about, you see the red line, our work in primary prevention is about preventing substance misuse before people are diagnosed with a problem. And we want to really reach the largest. You'll notice that universal prevention is kind of the largest kind of piece of the prevention pie here. And that doesn't mean that it's most important, but what it does mean is that after we've gone through our, a process where we've identified a problem, we want to look at, if we're looking at all middle schoolers that we're wanting to impact, and we know that there's some high substance alcohol rates for our youth, we want to develop strategies that are going to impact all of those young people, regardless of their level of risk. And then we also are including those young people who have, come from circumstances that put them at a higher risk. And that also, if we're looking at addressing the needs of all young people in that population, we're also working with those young people who are already starting to experiment, right? And who are starting to show some signs of substance misuse. So this idea of developing strategies, developing a universal strategy that's evidence-based, that catches all of that population, what it begins to do is it begins to help us to bring down the overall rates of that binge drinking or that problem in that population. And then we can also, layer in some interventions for the selective groups, or those groups that are at higher risk, because let's say they might have parents who are incarcerated. And we know that that is a risk factor for those young people. Or we also might want to layer in some indicated strategies as well. So this brings us to this idea of developing a comprehensive prevention plan using these three strategies. Now, as we move into kind of thinking about this idea of population level change, before kind of the SPIF came along, we were implementing an intervention here, an intervention there, and we were wondering why we weren't getting to, impact. And part of the issue was that we were not looking at kind of the overall community level changes that we needed to create in order to change rates in our community, to reduce the substance misuse in our overall community. So in public health, we're concerned with the individual, but our major focus is on changing the entire community through a population strategies. And that doesn't mean we're not going to implement interventions for middle schoolers or for high schoolers, or and still implement evidence-based interventions. But we're looking at population level change, and we're also looking at how people are interacting, we're looking at individual level characteristics that might put them, at higher risk or protect them from substance misuse, what relationships strengthen them, how they're interacting with their peers, their family, their coaches, their other people in their lives, mentors. We know that young people are interacting, with many individuals on a daily basis. So what is it in those relationships that can either promote health and success and or create risk? And same with community settings. And I know in many ways I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think it helps us to kind of reflect on these models so that we can look at where are our gaps, where are our strengths in the work that we're doing, and especially at the community level and in the coalition work that you're doing, and the partnerships you're building. Where are those strengths and where are those gaps as you look across these contexts? And then, of course, we have these societal impacts that are more about cultural effects and economics, social justice issues, et cetera, that are really impacting our community at large. So this is an example of, or a definition of risk and protective factors, and I'll let you take a minute to read this definition to yourselves. So we have learned a lot about risk and protective factors since the 80s, when doctors Hawkins and Conilano took what was happening with heart health and learning about risk and protection there. And they really developed this framework around researching risk and protective factors related to behavioral health challenges for youth. And there is strong longitudinal research around what are evidence-based risk factors and what are evidence-based protective factors that really precede or come before to create risk of a problem, or precede or come before a problem, a potential problem, to really protect one from actually falling into that risk behavior. So another key principle is that we use evidence-based risk and protective factors, understand them in our work, and we look at how they're coming through in the context of our specific communities. So let's take a moment, and we're going to do a little activity here. In a moment, I'm going to put a question in the chat, and I'm going to, or actually it's just going to come up on the screen here. And then before forming your answer and putting it into the chat, I want you to just take a moment and reflect on it. And then you can write down whatever your response is, and then wait a minute. And then when I say go, I want you to hit the return into the chat. And what we'll see are all of your responses at once. Okay. So all of this information is pulled from the YRBS, from Idaho's 2019 YRBS. So let's see how much we know here in the room about some of the data. So what percentage of Idaho's 9th through 12th grade youth reported playing one or more sports teams during the previous year? So think about that. What percentage of Idaho's 9th through 12th youth reported playing one or more sports teams? All right, go. Ooh, wasn't that fun? All right, let's see here. 59%. So Shannon McKnight was right on. Way to go, Shannon. Followed by Kelly. And Marco was pretty spot on as well. So we know that structured sports is a way for young people to stay healthy, and it's a pro-social activity. So let's see what the next one is here for you. Let's see how we do on it. What percentage of Idaho's youth, 9 through 12, report texting or emailing while driving a car in the past 30 days? Okay, reflect on your answer. Okay, go. Let's see here. 90%, 75. All right, let's see what it is. 48%. So a little lower on some of your little, so hopefully some of you are going to be pleased that it's almost just half. And if you thought it was 90%. So we're adjusting some perceptions here, right? Rose says kids are smarter than I gave them credit for. That's good. All right, and then what percentage of Idaho's 9th through 12th graders reported they felt sad or hopeless for 2 or more weeks in a row, so that they stopped doing some usual activities during the past 12 months? So reflect on that percentage. And go. All right, and let's see how we do here. So we have Susan was saying 33%, I think. Tara, 43, 65. So again, some people thought higher. And it's really good to be able to get a temperature check with looking at data, so that we don't overestimate or underestimate, and we can plan accordingly, right? But 39% is still pretty high. And this was pre-COVID. So let's do one more. What percentage of Idaho's 9th through 12th graders report at least one drink of alcohol on one or more of the past 30 days? So think about that. And go. All right. Let's see those spinning. 40%. Looks like a good percentage of people think it's 40%. So you're at 27%, actually. Now, the next question that I would want to know is kind of, you know, this is a good snapshot of data, but how is it trending? Is this number trending down compared to other years? Or is it trending up? Or is it stable? So as we're looking at data over years, this can really help us to identify what what areas we really need to address and how we're doing with promoting healthy behaviors in our communities. And this helps us with creating our comprehensive plan. So thanks so much for playing that with me. Let's do one more. And what percentage of 9th through 12th graders report there's at least one teacher or adult in their school that they can talk to if they have problems? And go. All right. And the answer is 69%. So that's pretty good that these young people feel like they have someone to talk to about their problems, 69%. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the YRBS data from 2019. If you haven't done so already for Idaho, it's pretty interesting. And it really speaks to kind of this need for us to think about shared risk and protective factors and how our work and the work you're doing begins to impact risk and protective factors that might overlap. And we know through a lot of the research that was done early on through Hawkins and Conlano, and then there's also examples of this that the Surgeon General gave in the 2016 Surgeon General report, that there are risk factors that are common across substance misuse, delinquency, teen pregnancy, school dropout, and violence. So this speaks to the importance of us really understanding what our data is and maybe selecting interventions that are going to address multiple risk factors, especially given the low number of dollars that we often get in substance misuse prevention. And the other thing that we want to really think about are those protective factors and how to systemically build protective factors into our work. And it does take a system to crack a system, I've heard. And if substance misuse and addiction is a system, it impacts families, communities, then we really have to be smart and comprehensive about in our approach with prevention. Because one single program is going to make a difference for some youth, but they still have to go back into that larger community with norms and family that may not be supportive of change and of those behaviors that are productive for young people to have, those pro-social behaviors. So when we start thinking about how do we organize protection for young people, we come to this strategy that was developed called the Social Development Strategy, and we'll get to that in a moment. But what it does is it uses this idea of where young people are in their development to increase protection. And we know that risk factors and protective factors, they wax and they wane and they change even in terms of where young people is in their physical, psychological development. Also with those transitions in their lives from puberty, childhood to puberty into early adulthood or becoming an older adult. This idea of risk and protection continues to change depending on where we are in our life. And so we want to develop strategies to address those changes, and we want to be strategic. And that's this idea of sitting down and looking at your data and understanding it and building capacity to really prioritize what risk and protective factors you're going to address, and using what interventions is really key, and how to evaluate those interventions is really needs to be a part of a large, comprehensive, effort so that you can sustain your efforts and your outcomes over time. And you do this through, understanding the culture of your community. And because your community is very different than, another community down the road. So that's where the power of interventions with our coalitions become so impactful, is that you're able to move across into these settings of the community to really begin to impact your community as you work in coalitions. And this is one way of looking at comprehensive prevention, is that those individual level interventions are connecting people at the individual and relationship level. And then environmental policies, like our strategies, our advocacy work, are beginning to impact community settings and the society. But prevention in a comprehensive plan is really looking at, hey, are we teaching our children not to stick their finger into a plug as a toddler so that they don't get electrocuted? That's one prevention intervention. But then also, are we baby proofing our house? And are we making it more challenging for that young person, to get hurt? And by building protective layers. So we want to be both, thinking about individual skill development as well as changing an environment. Because what we know is that we have over 90 evidence-based interventions that have shown long and lasting impact on the lives of young people and even into the next generation. However, that only happens if our communities are creating context to support those interventions. And that's what we call enabling context. And we do that through our data-driven planning processes, through our coalition work. And historically, what has been challenging is that we have plopped an intervention into a school district maybe, or we've tried to do a program in a social service agency without our community partners, our school partners, being ready for that. So that is what a planning process provides us, is the ability to really engage our community throughout and get them ready to implement these interventions. Because this is fixing a model that out of implementation science. And what they say is that, if there is any zero in this formula, you get zero. You don't get to, positive, healthy outcomes. So the enabling context is what provides that synergy and helps us with our uptake for these interventions. And coalitions are a key part of that. Your work, you are the conveners of dialogue, bringing together different service organizations who might not come together normally. And a coalition begins to create a system of care that's prevention-oriented. Treatment and recovery are key elements of our continuum of care. Very important, but we know that we're not going to treat our ways out of a behavioral health crisis. We have to get ahead of it. We have to move upstream, and that is what our work is in prevention. So the PTTC, how many of you, first of all, have used a GPS to get around? Let's see some hands raised. Chloe has, Shannon, right. So GPS has really become a part of our society for many of us. And it's made our lives easier. But how many of you remember when your dad pulled out a map and you were on a family trip trying to figure out where you were going and navigated using a map? many of us grew up in the 70s, 60s, and 70s taking vacations, and some of you were born later. But this used to be the way many of us got around, was through using these maps, and we still do, right? What's interesting is that satellites, they were around in the 60s. They were up in the sky. You know, that technology was there. However, it took many years to get all the different components together to get us to the point where we can get into our car and navigate or use our phone. Lots of technology had to come together and meet in order to make this happen, this communication happen. So this is kind of the tee up of what coalitions do, is that they help to bring together this context, this enabling context for interventions at the individual level and across the community, to be able to get people talking and learning together. And that is really our work and our purpose at the PTTC as well. Developing tools to support your work so that we're bringing the technology, which when I say technology, I mean the science, like these principles I've gone over. We're bringing that science to you so that it's not in a pipeline somewhere for 17 years before you get to use it. But we're trying to make it very usable and friendly. And so that you can use it right here, right now, and use this information to make decisions in your community. And this is what we at the Northwest PTTC call community activated prevention, where our goal is to help you activate your communities for change and for lasting change. We just are in the process of using sending out a needs assessment. We do this annually to find out what the needs are for our prevention workforce. And in Region 10, and you'll see Idaho here. Right now, we have the top 3 areas that you're interested in learning more about and getting training on. But notice that the numbers are still pretty low. So our needs assessment is going to be out for another probably till the end of October. So we would really appreciate it if you haven't done so, or if you know your colleagues haven't, please take a moment to complete this survey so that we can really tailor our services more to you. And there's always an opportunity. We offer free services. We do have to keep our budget in mind, but we work to really tailor them to meet the needs of our workforce. Example of this is the Enhanced Prevention Learning Series. And what we've done with these is we have developed a process where we present an hour webinar on a particular topic. And this is kind of ideally, we sometimes fall short of kind of working through the entire sequence. We're only in our 3rd year here, and so we're getting better with this. But this is what we call focused training, in that we provide a general webinar first to anyone, universal strategy we're using to any of our prevention practitioners. And then we invite them to be a part of a series on a given topic. And during that, there are no more than probably 15 or 20 people in those at the most. And we work to build knowledge and practice skills. And then we incorporate some one-on-one consultation with an expert. And then at the end of these, we also look to build communities of practice that are learner-driven. So we've developed 7 of these different enhanced prevention learning series on these various topics. And we have piloted all of them. And if you haven't participated in any of them, we would really welcome your participation. If you would like to have one that is specifically for Idaho, that only Idaho folks attend, we can most likely set one of these up and do these just for you. An example I'm going to walk through very briefly. We have a 4-session ethics in substance misuse prevention, EPLS, and it goes through each of these, each of the principles of prevention, ethical practice and prevention. And, excuse me. And then we also have one of these that we've just developed for people who are working in American Indian, Alaska Native communities, because there's some very specific ethical conundrums there. And also as outsiders coming into those communities, there's some ethical considerations. And then we also have one on the social development strategy. And we go deep into what does it mean to build skills, opportunity to create opportunities first, based on individuals' characteristics, and to make those opportunities meaningful. And then we look at what does it mean to build skills that are developmentally appropriate, and to give recognition for young people that is meaningful to them and is specific to what their needs are, and how we talk in that EPLS about how it creates bonding and why bonding is so important, so that you can create clear standards and for healthy behavior. And once that bonding is established, we know young people are more likely to follow these standards. So we go in depth into the SDS model during this EPLS. And then we have the organizational elements of healthy coalitions. And I know I'm just about out of time. Is it okay, David, if I take about 5 more minutes?
Yeah, you actually have till 10:15.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. I don't want to take up more time than you've allotted. But the organizational elements of effective coalitions is 7 sessions, and it really
Michelle, you got muted. We can't hear you.
Oops. Okay, thanks. So just to repeat, the organizational elements of effective coalitions takes a deep dive into what are effective ways for coalitions to do prevention in communities and what makes coalitions effective. So let's just take a minute to think about what are some of the challenges of doing coalition work, or what are some of the challenges that rural communities face in terms of creating substance misuse prevention strategies and doing prevention work? What are some of the challenges rural communities face? And you can go ahead and put that into the chat. Limited access to healthcare, resources, funding, resources. Yes. Resistance to outsiders coming in and telling us what to do. Nobody likes to be told what to do we? And that is challenging. That's culture. Community capacity to do the work, the same 6 people, right? Funding, participation. All right, so you all know your communities. You know what the challenges are. So these are challenges that you as community members or coalitions have, right? And then what are, transportation is an issue. What are two strengths or advantages of rural coalitions? What two strengths or challenges do rural coalitions possess? Name two, if you can, in the chat box. Think about two strengths or advantages that rural coalitions have. And you can put those in the chat box. Relationships, volunteerism, strong partnerships. Geographic distance, okay? You've got some buffering there from maybe some big city issues. Reaching out and helping even one family, seeing the light bulb come on, right? So you're embedded in deep and authentic connection to community. I really appreciate that, Susan. I lived in South Dakota for 15 years, and I, live outside of Reno now in a more rural area, but there's nothing like being in a rural, remote area for, I don't know, having a sense of authenticity. I loved it. So interesting, you see here some challenges that you've mentioned. Fewer agencies or fewer partners. On the left, you see other challenges that you've mentioned. Resources are limited, lack of diversity, etc. I'm not going to go into all of these. But then, there's always a flip side, right? Interesting how some of these challenges, when we turn them around, there are also the strengths and some opportunities embedded in those challenges. Everybody knows everyone means faster mobilization. You can call people up and they're going to be there probably to help you. Other areas of strength means that you can take advantage and facilitate that collaborative work, interconnections between social networks. And this is where I was talking about those enabling context. And I remember, when I was doing coalition work in Sturgis, South Dakota, or, in Lead, the coalition, when you have the principal or, and the person who's also, the head of social services, sitting down at the table with you, and you're starting to talk through, and the sheriff, these common issues, over time, you're building that trust. You're building a sense of a knowledge of what prevention is in that community, and willingness to come together to share resources over time. So coalitions create that enabling environment. And the way they do it is through really building up their internal capacities first. Now, I know COVID has hit everyone really hard. And I just really hope that you and your communities are staying healthy or getting healthy. If you've not been healthy due to COVID, it has really, put us, I think, in a place where we're feeling in isolation in many ways. But we've also, as coalition folks, found ways to be nimble. And Rose had mentioned during our leadership counter, we had a leadership academy recently. I think at the end was the need to really reset. And how do we do that in our coalition work? So that, I think, is something worth giving some time to reflect on, is that as we move through the COVID experience, how can we reset? And it might be revisiting some of these elements of what, effective coalitions can do, and why we want to embed these elements into our work and strengthen them so that there can be that adoption of prevention, science-based prevention approach in our community. And that's really how we get to those positive impacts is, through those collaborations. So your coalition work is key to that, key to helping create these changes in a community context, in your community. So we also have an enhanced prevention learning series on how do we create systems change. And we focus on kind of these 4 elements that impact and really help to create an enabling context when we're looking at implementing programs, practices, and interventions that might be evidence or environmental strategies too. So this is a 6-week enhanced prevention learning series. And a lot of this learning series is working with people, trainers who've worked with the Annie E. Casey Foundation and looking at this puzzle and these puzzle pieces. And then I mentioned that we developed the Activating Communities for Change, and this goes deeply into what are understanding rules and regulations and policies, and how do we analyze policies and identify what's movable, what can we change, where is there some flexibility for change, where should a community take a stand, and really how to make those changes. So by the end, people have an action plan, and they've looked at how to frame messages for optimal influence. And this probably could be a 5-session EPLS as well. And we have developed some tools that are on our website that we bring into the EPLS for this as well, which is, this is a regulatory guide on alcohol. And there's some worksheets there that people work through. And this is, again, available on our website. And then part of this kind of a toolkit is also some work that we did in April around, it's a campaign called #Proof is in the Numbers. And we made this really open source so people can go in and create their own memes using Canva. And we've got some other tools in this toolkit about how to reach out to your legislators, other decision makers, some templates, etc. And we know that evaluating our efforts is super hard, especially in rural communities with low numbers. And we just had a 2 series pilots of this 2 times this summer, and on the ripple effects mapping. And this is an appreciative inquiry process where we get people come together, and this can be in person or online, and they start telling their stories about their experience with, maybe a particular funding stream with their coalitions. And they start looking at what are the impacts. And so it's a way of getting very clear about what impacts are that may be overlooked with only a quantitative data collection or evaluation process. And then we also have a 7-session enhanced prevention learning series on sustainability. And we've learned that, we have to make sustainability planning a part of the work we do in prevention, so that it's not an add-on, but too often it is an add-on. So we walk people through, how do you develop a common understanding of sustainability with your community partners and develop a team to really kind of put sustainability up front and center in your work. And then when the time comes, how do you develop strategies so that you can really look at what do you sustain over time and what don't you sustain? Maybe not all of our interventions or practices are effective. So it gives you a way to make some of those decisions. And then, of course, strong leadership is key in our work, and leadership that is empowering and in service of community, the community change that we want to see and of our future generations. I think that's what's been modeled to me through my work with, Dr. Kevin Haggerty and Dr. Cooper, is, leadership that's powerful and empowering. And with our Prevention Leadership Academy recently, what we've done over the past 2 years is we've looked at leadership principles, and we've also looked at some structures that kind of flatten the hierarchy, right? So that everyone has a voice at the table. And then we also bring in what are the elements of effective teams, and then that we look at how these work together to get people to the outcomes they're seeking. So this is the model that we've just used as part of our Leadership Academy. And we talk a lot about modeling the way, inspiring a vision. How do we challenge the process with respect, enable others to act, and act with heart in our communities, while also helping our teams and our coalitions be goal-driven and be reflective of diverse groups in our community, and stay efficient, because we know that, it can be challenging if we have diverse people on our teams. To be efficient and stay cohesive, we have to have conflict mediation processes in place. So I think we're going to be doing some more work around that as well. How do we prevent and mediate conflict on our coalitions and in our communities in service of a better vision for our communities and our youth? And part of that Leadership Academy, we're gleaning lessons from the field, the prevention practitioners in Region 10, and we have these available, and I will make sure that you get those links. So just to wrap up, I know I've shared a lot here today. I hope it's been helpful. We will have easy access to some of the user-friendly tools that I've mentioned, and also the online survey that we have. And I'm going to stop sharing now and just see very quickly if there are any comments or questions about what I've shown, what I've discussed today. And I really would encourage you to reach out to me. And if you or your, coalitions, if a group of you want to take an EPLS and say, hey, we just want this to be an Idaho thing, we have, elements of effective coalitions or sustainability, we can most likely set that up.
Okay. Well, if anybody does have any questions, I know, are we able to share this, your PowerPoint with people?
Absolutely. And I will make sure that Chloe gets all of the resources.
So Chloe will get that, and she'll include Michelle's contact information. If you don't have it, that way, even if you do, you have it readily available. Sometimes I know I have someone's email, but I'm like, what was it again? So we'll make sure you have everything you need to successfully reach out to her. Thank you so much, Michelle, for stepping in and helping me fill this need.